A shade under a month into the NHL season, we are starting to sort through who's actually good at hockey this year.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Locked On NHL Power Rankings. I am your host, Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my co-host, Hunter Hodies, one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins, and we want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can start the NFL season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, on today's edition of the Locked On NHL Power Rankings, we are going to bounce around. We are going to do a little bit better about talking about the Western Conference. As two guys in the East, we do tend to skew towards the Eastern Conference and our time zones. But today, we're going to open talking about the Central. Our second segment, we're going to talk about the Pacific Division. And then our final segment, we're going to sandwich the Atlantic and the Metro together into one overarching conversation about the state of the East. So I don't think we can talk about the Central without starting this conversation with how hot the Jets have come out of the gate. I watched them last night put a hurting on the Red Wings as the Yankee game was slowly developing. They absolutely pummeled Detroit. I know Detroit got back in that game at one point and was looking a little bit hairy. But man, when the Jets got going in that game, it was really special. And I know the Jets profile as a really good regular season team. And then whenever the playoffs come, their lack of depth and their high-end guys not necessarily being as good as their opponents' high-end guys has been their undoing. But man, they're rolling right now. Best team in the league out of the gate into the first month. And they picked up right where they left off last year because they were great in the regular season last year as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said during our preview episode when we previewed the Central, I wanted to see it again from Winnipeg before I really fully buy in for another year. I picked them to make the playoffs, but I didn't have them in the top three of the Central. Well, obviously I'm looking pretty foolish, at least for the first month of the season. But again, this is why I wanted to see it again. You're seeing a lot of contributions from a lot of different players in the lineup. I mean, Kyle Connor has 9 goals and 17 points in 10 games. Mark Scheifele is also off to a very hot start. You have Neil Pionk, Nick, well over a point per game, 12 points in 10 games. Josh Morrissey is also having a great year. You have Ehlers a point per game. They are getting so much scoring from every single line to open this season. It doesn't matter which line is out there. Teams have to game plan for every single line just because of the depth scoring they're getting. Hellebuck, he's obviously giving them really good goaltending. The Penguins just played them a couple of weeks ago, and the Penguins were playing well for the first half of that game, I would say. They go up 2-0, but then after that, it was just a slew of Winnipeg goals. They woke up out of nowhere, and it's been nice seeing, again, their depth really stepping up. You're getting contributions from the back end. If they can sustain this through an entire season, kind of like they did last year, they are going to be dangerous in the playoffs. But I think the thing with Winnipeg is they got to get the right matchup. I felt like they kind of got the wrong matchup last year because their top guys weren't able to stop Colorado's top guys. And obviously, not a lot of teams are going to be able to stop Colorado's top guys. But I do think if Winnipeg gets the right matchup in the playoffs, assuming this continues, they're going to be able to make a lot of noise, especially if also Hellebuck has a much better series in the playoffs. But he's been fantastic. Their depth's been great. Defensively, they've been rock solid. I mean, heading into that game against the Penguins, they had only given up a few goals in, I think, their first 5 games. They've been one of the best defensive teams in the league, but you expect that from the Jets. You know, it started under Bonus, now it's under Arneal. So you're in for a rock fight every time you play this team.
Yeah, so far, the Jets have played 10 regular season games. They're 9-1-0. Yeah. They're conceding 2.4 goals against per game. League average is well over 3 right now. Granted, we're early, so those averages are going to come down and even out a little bit more. But the Jets are off to a tremendous start. And I don't want to call them like quality depth guys, but like pieces like Nemesnikov, Adam Lowry, Nino Niederreiter, like really solid veteran NHL guys. None of them particularly flashy, none of them particularly gaudy point totals. But those are all really solid pros who play responsible two-way hockey, who have a strong impact on possession. and it's given them a little bit more juice. They have gotten a little bit from their younger guys who they have managed to integrate in Cole Perfetti, who is a good player, and it feels like I've been waiting forever for him to really stick at the NHL level. Switching up gears in the Central, Minnesota and Utah, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but reasonably good. I'm going to flash our graphic here on the stream if you're watching over on YouTube. But in the Central, we have Winnipeg in first, the host voted. And then Minnesota and Utah ahead of Colorado and well ahead of Nashville. Granted, Nashville is struggling mightily and the Avalanche are injured beyond belief right now. But give credit where it's due. Minnesota has come out of the gate hot. Kaprizov very much looks like one of the best players in the world. They have gotten above average goaltending from Philip Gustafsson, and they got a goalie goal from Philip Gustafsson as well. They look pretty good. And Utah, in spite of the injuries, Utah's back end is injured beyond belief right now, but they look reasonably good.
Yeah, Minnesota, Kaprizov is in the Hart conversation, at least to open the season in the first month. He has been fantastic for the Wild. I would agree. I wouldn't say this came out of nowhere. I feel like the Wild have had this capability, but I feel like we've been wanting to see it because I said heading into the season, I didn't see the Wild as a team making the playoffs. I said they would potentially be in the conversation, but they're even exceeding my expectations, at least to start their season. If Kaprizov is able to keep this up, they will make the playoffs just considering the level that he's playing at. But you look at some of their depth guys, think, Zuccarello, he's also off to a really good start. Marco Rossi, it's awesome seeing him play well after everything, he's been through. Gustafsson, he's .922 this year. He really struggled, it felt like, for the Wild last year, just wasn't playing that well. Having him back this year and playing at a high level just really improves the ceiling of this team. And then you have a capable 1B in Marc-Andre Fleury. He obviously just had his big night in Pittsburgh earlier this week. That's the final time he'll be playing in Pittsburgh for his career. He's off to at least a fine start this year. But the big one is Gustafsson is playing better. Kaprizov is playing at a Hart Trophy level, and they're getting the depth scoring. And also, Jared Spurgeon just came back. I feel like people have really underrated that loss. He is a key backbone on that blue line. And then Utah can score, man. I mean, Clayton Keller is off to a great start. I really liked how they improved their defense over the offseason. They also just acquired Oli Mata from the Red Wings. He's a capable second, third pairing guy if needed. But that's a team that I do think is going to be in the conversation throughout the year. But, you look at this Central as a whole and, you flash the rankings, Nashville's at the bottom. I expect them to wake up. Colorado, man, I mean, they're 5-6 in their first 11 games. They just need to get guys back healthy at this point. I mean, Nick, they have Oliver Shillington, a defenseman, playing on the third line right now. That is how banged up Colorado is this season. They need some of their players back, or they got to start making a trade or two. I mean, we obviously just saw one trade made this week. You're going to see more trades, I think, happen throughout the season here. I think teams are starting to get a bit nervous about where their season is going. I think Colorado is probably one of them right now, considering how the Avalanche are so banged up. But again, they got to get some guys back. They got to make a trade to improve the forward group. And I think Nashville, it's all about, just getting these new faces to figure it out in the lineup, and also getting UC Saros to play a bit better too.
Yeah, Nashville, you can tell they're still in that feeling out process of trying to figure out who's going to play with who over the course of the entire season. And then I'll give kudos to Utah for making that trade purely because you lost two defensemen after all. Utah put a lot into overhauling their back end this offseason. They replaced 3 of the 6 guys who had their most minutes last year, and losing 2 guys for a team like Utah that doesn't have a lot of expectation, it would have been very reasonable for them to be like, well, it's too early to burn assets. We're going to see how it goes. If we're hanging around a month or 2 from now, maybe we go and get it. And look, Oli Mata's not fixing your problem, but he's an NHL caliber defenseman, which is better than calling someone up from the A or finding the next waiver claim. So I give credit to Utah for giving that group an early sign of confidence. After everything that group has been through over the last handful of seasons, having a front office and having an ownership that's aligned with the idea of we want to reward good play, we want to take care of our guys. Something like that is small, but it does mean something for those guys. So we're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On NHL. When we come back, we are going to talk about the weirdly struggling Pacific Division. So be sure to stick around. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to start today. If you were so curious, tonight we have got the dead and buried New York Jets, our 2.5-point home favorites against CJ Stroud and the weirdly struggling Houston Texans. Other interesting games this weekend. We've got divisional stuff. We've got the Dolphins heading up to Buffalo, the Bills 5.5-point home favorites. Exciting game in the NFC North. The Lions heading up to Green Bay. The Lions 3.5-point road favorites. So if you want to get in on the action, visit FanDuel.com to join today, where you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where we are breaking down the latest iteration of the NHL Power Rankings as voted on by the Locked On NHL hosts. So in looking at the Pacific Division, I think you can very quickly understand why they are where they're at, the rankings, why they are. Calgary's out of the gate reasonably hot, much better than anybody thought they would be. Vancouver and Edmonton dealing with a myriad of issues. Seattle and LA, perfectly adequate performances so far. And then Vegas, good team, not slow out of the gate as Edmonton and Vancouver. So it makes sense where everybody is. But let's start with Edmonton and Vancouver, because those are the headliners. You know, you and I picked them both to finish first and second in this division in our previews. And Edmonton's issues are very straightforward. They're not scoring enough goals, and their defense is atrocious. You know, Darnell Nurse the Oilers have played 10 games, and Darnell Nurse has been on the ice for 9 5-on-5 goals against, and he's been on the ice for, I want to say, 5 penalty kill goals against. So the Oilers are really struggling offensively, and it's making their defensive issues even more pronounced. For Vancouver, it's weird. You know, Pettersson hasn't really gotten going. Their defense isn't really coming together the way they envisioned it. So there's a lot going on with both of those teams, but it's definitely safe to say they're both underperforming right now.
Well, it also doesn't help that Edmonton's going to be out without Connor McDavid for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So yeah, I feel like their scoring issues are going to at least continue until he comes back. And they have one of the worst shooting percentages in the league this year. That should tell you how badly they're struggling to score to start this season. And I do think that's going to correct itself. I think the Oilers, this team went out 2-9-1 out of the gate last year, and they were able to figure it out. So I'm not really too concerned yet about the Oilers. If they're still playing like this in, say, January, February, then okay, I'll start to get a bit concerned about, their playoff chances. But it's been only 10 games. We've seen this team go on plenty of big winning streaks, at least in the regular season over these last couple of years. I think they're going to be just fine. I think when McDavid comes back, he'll be a man on a mission. I think Draisaitl will be, again, fine as well. But, with Vancouver, again, I think partly it's getting some of these new guys integrated into the lineup. But I also think part of it is, well, I wouldn't say, well, I guess it's a little bit of consistency. I think, they were a little bit down to start the year. Then they had a nice winning streak, and now they're kind of a little bit down again. I think the Canucks just need to find that right level of consistency this season. You look at them right now, they've lost a couple in a row. They're 4-2-3 overall, 11 points tied for third in the Central, but they have a -4 goal differential to start the season. Their 5-on-5 numbers are, overall fine, but they have another level that they can reach, and I expect them to. I think the goaltending for the most part so far has been fine. You're seeing Demko really ramping it up in practice. I think it's probably getting close to him coming back. So once that happens, and assuming he's at least as healthy as he can be, again, that team is also going to be just fine. But you mentioned the Flames as well, Nick. They had that really nice start, but they've also lost 4 in a row now. They're 5-4-1. They're kind of at least starting to fall back down to earth a little bit, not to the level that you and I both thought they would be out of the gate, but they're starting to, not be at the top of the division like, no one predicted, basically. So you have that. You have Seattle, who they're going to be in this race, I feel like, the entire season. This is a team that I picked them to make the playoffs in our preview episode. I have them in a wild card spot. LA, they're more or less kind of just doing what they've been doing these last several years. They're at least fine in the regular season, but when the playoffs come around and they go up against some of the big dogs, I just don't think they have the horses to compete, with a team like Edmonton, a team like Vancouver. But they're still at least good enough to play, good hockey in the regular season. But still, I want to see how that goes for a full season with how, I do think Vancouver is going to come out of this rut. I do think Edmonton's going to come out of this rut. Sometimes teams start slow. So I fully expect those two teams to be fine. And then Calgary, I think you're going to start to see them continue falling, but hey, maybe they'll get back to playing at least a little bit better like they were earlier in the year.
The Oilers are averaging 2.2 goals a game. They don't have a goal from Arvidsson or Hyman yet. Bouchard, McDavid, and Draisaitl have, I want to say it's 12 of their 22 goals they've scored through 10 games. They are not getting the offense that you would expect, and it's making their defensive issues more pronounced. And I've been saying it on Locked On Oilers, don't talk to me about the defense till they score more than 3 goals in a game, because the Oilers are designed to outscore their issues. That is the fundamental roster philosophy. That no matter how bad the second and third pairs are, no matter how clunky Stuart Skinner might be on a given night, they should be scoring a minimum of 3.5 to 4 goals a game. And that should be good enough most nights. And we know that strategy is fickle come playoff time, that it's hard to outscore your defensive issues. But as far as the regular season goes, yeah, man, it's got to be better. And I want to say one last thing on the Oilers, and I do have other points I want to hit on the division, but the Oilers give back a lot defensively in the McDavid and Draisaitl minutes, because they win those minutes in terms of territory and expected goals. But when you win those minutes with possession, but not actually scoring, it makes the defensive issues more pronounced. It makes it look bad that Draisaitl's consistently out there for goals against, that McDavid is out there consistently for goals against, when the puck's not going in the net. And look, I expect Hyman to still end up somewhere in the ballpark of 30 goals. I think Arvidsson is a safe bet for 15 to 20 goals. But right now, I don't know if you know this, Hunter, but if you multiply any number by 0, it's still 0. So right now, Hyman and Arvidsson are both on pace for donuts in the stat sheet next to the goal column. And then real quick, LA is in a weird spot. Seattle's in a weird spot. Very similar teams in the sense that they should be perfectly adequate for the regular season. But I share your skepticism about their long-term prospects. Ditto with Calgary. Calgary's off to a nice start. It's a nice story. They have the nobody believes in us thing from Major League going right now, that everyone thinks they're going to be bad, me included. I picked them to finish last in the Pacific. I just don't think there's a world where you can sustain this, where guys who haven't proven themselves or are a little bit on the older side. And look, it's good to see Huberdeau playing well. It's good to see Dustin Wolf playing well, because you never want to see anyone struggle. I do want to make that point, that you never want to see anyone not playing well. You would rather everyone play their best and lose than teams stink. And then the Sharks, I'm very excited for Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, but Will Smith probably looks, I don't want to say overmatched, but the game looks a little fast for him right now. He may or may not benefit from a little more developmental time. The Ducks, they're weird because, they have talent. I watched the game they played. Dostal has been outstanding for them in the games he started for them. They looked pretty good against the Islanders the other night. And granted, we're going to talk about the Islanders and how weird
he's their goalie of the future, man. He played in Pittsburgh last year, and he was really good. I honestly did not know much about him, but after that game, I was like, okay, this kid might have a future in this league. I think whenever they decide to probably trade Gibson to another team, whenever that happens, it feels like, though, that's been rumored for the last 3 years at this point, they're going to hand the keys over to this kid, because he's playing really well over these last year and change. And I think they have something in him, but the Ducks have a lot of talent. It's just a matter of them. I feel like a lot of these young guys reaching their potential.
It's very funny you say that, because that's going to be one of the big themes I want to talk about when we talk about the Eastern Conference, and not necessarily about young guys, just teams that are very talented, but they're not being able to capitalize on that talent at the moment. And then real quick on Dostal, he started 7 games. He's 4-2-1. He's got a .943 save percentage and a 2 goals against average. He's been lights out to start the season. We're going to take one more quick break. We come back. We will tackle the very weird Eastern Conference. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. At PrizePicks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. If you pulled up the PrizePicks landing page, you could do whether or not Joe Mixon is going to have more than 84.5 rushing yards, if CJ Stroud is going to throw for more than 225 passing yards. If you are all in on the Aaron Rodgers bounce back game, more than 236.5 passing yards. So if you want to get in on the fun, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL, get $50 instantly. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where we are walking through the power rankings. So I want to talk about the East through a specific lens, because right now it feels like other than the Rangers in Florida, everybody's kind of mid. Like even the Leafs, who look decent, have still played some pretty bad hockey. The Bruins are playing really bad hockey. I watched a bit of the Lightning last night against Colorado, and they looked reasonably good. Gensel had a couple tucks, but nobody really looks great other than the two big dogs. Everybody else is like nice on paper. And Washington beat the Rangers the other night. Washington thoroughly outplayed the Rangers. I can put my hand up and say that, but like Ovechkin's not scoring 2 standing alone with nobody within 15 feet of him most nights. You know, they are not going to be able to destroy teams possession wise the way they did the Rangers that night. The Devils, all of their new pieces are not really fitting. Simon Nemec has been a healthy scratch a couple games in a row. The Islanders, as we talked about before we started recording, have been absolutely atrocious defensively. They only have one line that can score with any real consistency. The Penguins are in goalie purgatory and can't play any defense. The Blue Jackets and the Flyers both look awful. I mean, the Flyers, I don't think Tortorella is going to get fired in season. We talked about it last week, but they look awful. And then over in the Atlantic, I mean, that bottom half looks god-awful. I mean, the Sabres, Montreal, Detroit, Ottawa, those teams all look horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, in the East, I do think the top 2 teams are the Rangers and the Panthers, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if we get that in the conference final game. But I will say, Tampa Bay, they've won 3 in a row. Jake Gensel's off to a great start with them this season, scoring at will. His playmaking ability is still very much there. Just a seamless fit with the Lightning. And they can make that a super line if they want. They can also move Gensel down the lineup if they want to give them a bit more depth. But Tampa Bay is off to, I feel like, at least a pretty good start this year. But I agree with you about the bottom half of the Atlantic. You know, Buffalo, again, until I see it, I'm not going to believe them at this point. Detroit, man.
Detroit stinks. Detroit can't play any defense.
Defensively, they are a wreck to watch. And I don't know, man. If they don't make the playoffs this year, too, I really feel like that could be the end of Steve Yzerman there.
You got a receipt for that Yzer plan?
Yeah.
You got a receipt? Is it within the 90 days? Can I return this? This plan stinks.
What's the old right now?
What's the old Bill Parcells quote? If you got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have 1 quarterback. If you have 3 goalies, you don't have a goalie. Detroit stinks. They can't play defense to save their life. Seider, as good as he is, that's one guy. You can't build a defense with 1 good defenseman and then a bunch of free agents who are, you know, third pair guys and expect it to work. Detroit really did get screwed at various points as far as lottery luck, but that lineup is not very good. I was very bullish on Ottawa. I thought Ottawa had an outside chance of being reasonably good, but it's not really coming together for them either. It's weird, man. All of these teams, like Detroit has enough forward talent where they should be better than this. Montreal has more talent. They should be better than this. Buffalo has more talent. All of these struggling teams, like even the Penguins, even the Islanders, those teams are better than they're playing.
No, I agree. I mean, Montreal, they have the talent up front, but Nick, again, they can't play defense. They are arguably the worst defensive team in the league, right up there with the Penguins. And I can't even believe I'm saying that with the Penguins, just with how that's just goes to show how bad the Penguins are this year. They have given up the most high danger chances at 5-on-5 this season, the Penguins, if you go to natural stat trick. Scoring chances, they're right up there as well. They are top 5 in expected goals for. They are bottom 5 in expected goals against and high danger chances against. So the Penguins can score. They're just giving it all back in their own end. And Blomqvist and Nedeljkovic, they've been fine enough. I mean, Blomqvist, he's given them a chance to win some of these games. He's just not getting any help. Same with Alex Nedeljkovic. And again, going back to Montreal, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like their goalies are giving them a chance. They just can't keep the puck out of their own net, and they can't play defense in their own zone. So the Islanders, Sorokin has actually bounced back to start this year, but it's Varlamov who I feel like has kind of been a bit down this year compared to last year. But the biggest thing is for the Islanders, they can't score.
No.
They've been shut out. I have that in my notes 4 times already this year. That's atrocious. And I understand the Islanders aren't that big of a scoring team in the NHL. They haven't been a big scoring team for the last several years now. But how are you getting shut out 4 times and the season isn't even a month old yet? That's not good. I know the Islanders have started slow these last couple of years. I know they figured it out at times, in January and in February. But I don't know, something just seems wrong with this Islanders team to start the year. And I don't know, man. It's not good. The Flyers have been bad to start this year. I will give Columbus credit. They're 5-3-1 to start the season. They've won a couple games in a row. I don't think that's going to last, but at least they're playing some inspired hockey to start the year. New Jersey, I do think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to make the playoffs. They're a contender, at least in my eyes. They're playing like one of the top teams in the conference. But I do think if I had to, rank it, the top teams at the East, I would go, New York and Florida at the top, followed probably by New Jersey, Tampa Bay, and then maybe if you want to go Toronto, and then et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, the Bruins got to figure this out too. I mean, again, we talked about this last week. Jim Montgomery was screaming at Brad Marchand on the bench. It's been.
I will say about that, Marchand did say, and I commend him for doing this. He said, "Good, I deserve to be yelled at." It takes a lot of professionalism to be like, "Yeah, I messed up. He should have done that." You're right. So good on Marchand for doing that.
Right. No, and I agree. I think Zadorov, could be a bit better in Boston. I
don't think he's a first pair guy. I think that's the issue. I think he's playing too many minutes. Because this has been an issue, even when he was in Calgary, and him and Gabranson were the third pair on the year that they on the team, the year they had 110 points. They only played 14, 15 minutes a game, but he still was amongst the league at leaders in penalty per 60 because he's just a big dude, and big guys take a lot of penalties.
Right. And I do think even Lindholm, who they also signed, I feel like he has more to give this season too. Definitely. 5 points in 10 games. That's not good enough from your top line center. I feel like he's going to have to play a lot better for them to turn this around as well. But I'm still not going to doubt them just yet. I think, again,
no.
If they're still playing like this in January, February.
Fool me once, not fooling me again. Yes. I have pronounced the Bruins dead more than once. And one of the times I did that, they set the record for points in a season. So I will not be pronouncing the Bruins dead until the body is cold and the medical examiner has made the call. One last thing. This is a question, hypothetical question. Of that middle class in the East, Boston, Tampa Bay, Washington, Carolina, you can put the Islanders, the Penguins, whatever. Who do you feel the best about that group, of that middle class in the East?
Would you put Tampa in there?
Yeah, I would say Tampa, Boston, Toronto.
I would say
Tampa over Toronto. Yeah, I see that. I do think Carolina is proving that it doesn't matter who's on their team. They're just going to Corsi you to death every year, and they're going to be fine in the regular season. But man, it's weird right now. I still don't feel like, I know we say this every year that the NHL doesn't have parity. It just has a bunch of bad teams. That's how the Islanders got back into a playoff spot last year. The East was terrible. Same thing with Washington. Washington was awful, and they still got in. And that looks like the case again this year.
And I will say about Washington, at least, they made some good moves.
I like the moves. Yeah, I agree with you. They're hurt at the moment.
They're trying to be fun to watch while Ovi goes and gets the record, while also trying to be semi-competitive, but also set up the next window of contention. They're doing all 3 things at once, and I feel like they're doing a pretty good job of it. Jacob Chikrin, that was a really nice move. Mangiapane, that's a really nice move. They added to their forward group. They added to their defensive group. They brought in another goaltender. I like the moves that they made. Now, I was a bit more skeptical this year because I wanted to see them do it again. And so far, I'm looking like a complete idiot for that. But they are playing better hockey to start the year. It's more fun to watch. They're not just getting caved in every night and getting a late goal, to not even have, the minus 37 goal differential or something like that. No, this team is at least more fun to watch this year. And again, it's not Ovechkin doing this on a nightly basis. It's their depth players.
Shout out Connor McMichael.
Yeah.
All right. That'll do it for today's edition of the Locked On NHL Power Rankings. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week. Until then.